Hey guys, it's Mark, and welcome to this special edition of Hypnosis Hangout. In this edition, you have the opportunity to look over the shoulder and become part of the discussion that was held on what stage hypnosis is going to look like in the Post Covid-19 era. Enjoy this. Comments below. First, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending. I guess the world needs laughter now more than ever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This is a historic meeting in many ways. Obviously, the times we're in, the state of our industry, and of course, the coming together of an incredible group of talented stage hypnotists for the mutual benefit of each other and betterment of our industry. So what I'm asking for right now, what we're going to look to do right now, is that historically, as stage hypnotists, we've been the ones who have brought hypnosis to the public and have kept it alive. From the time of Friends, Mesmer, all the way through, it was the stage hypnotists that made it happen. And I can't find a single time in history of our industry of hypnosis that we've been faced with a challenge like we've been this time. And I know of no other group of people who are better suited and better able to overcome it. So having said that, we are really the experts. I'm in a meeting for the next 2 hours. Right. Let's get everybody in here. Keep coming in. So what we have in front of us, I think, in our opinion, is the opportunity to reach more people than we ever could have imagined possible through a whole new host of media, as well as our traditional way of dealing with things. And I think now more than ever, people are craving interaction. They're craving stress relief, a chance to escape the stress and anxiety of life. And people are really beginning to examine what is important. And perhaps maybe for the first time, examining what's important in their life. And I think what they're going to come to realize is something we already know. What's important is love and laughter. And we give them that opportunity. So having said that, as we all know, we are the only form of entertainment that solely depends on having volunteers on our stages. Without our volunteers, we really do not have a show. And so with that in mind, the purpose of this meeting is to ensure that we have them. It's to ensure that their comfort and safety and our ability to continue to follow our love and our passion and our lives. So as you can see from your screen, we have a large group of volunteers in here and a large group of participants. And so in order to facilitate all of that, in order to facilitate each one of us being able to participate in a meaningful way, I think the only way that we're going to be able to do that is by breaking out into smaller groups. And so over the next 90 minutes or so, I would like to encourage everybody to do several things. One, the way I've envisioned it so that we can get moving forward in the most expeditious way that brings something to the table that we can all live with, take something away from, is to run a series of 20-minute breakout rooms. And in those rooms, there's very specific challenges that for each task that we, in my mind, need to look at so that we can move forward. In the first breakout, we need to identify what the challenges are and how do we answer them? How do we come to them? Once you've completed that breakout period, we come back together and we share what your breakout room has come to. From there, this next breakout is the new way of doing skits. What do we keep? What do we lose? What does anything change? Now, this is part of the process of looking at where we are, where we're going, and what we need to do in the long term and perhaps in the short term. Then we come back together and discuss that part. And finally, Is there room to move forward in a different way? What new ways can we move this process forward? What ways can we work together so that people along the line can now enjoy what we do, and we can get back out into the stages that we so love? That's my initial thoughts. If somebody has a particular pressing issue that they'd like to talk about, that'd be great.
I don't want to interrupt, but if people can mute their microphone, I can hear people chewing and everything. Unless they're going to say a question, then they can unmute it.
That I can mute everybody and do that for the time being. What I would like for you to do is the following. Couple of simple ground rules I think that we can all live with, okay? I think the first thing is we need to play nice in the sandbox. Please leave your egos, disputes, and rivalries at the door. We're all big people. We have the ability to understand and change and reframe and take advantage of unique situations. Cooperation will lead us to really have an incredible ability to move forward. We can leave with new respect, we can leave with new appreciation for one another, and we can plan to move our industry and our own businesses forward, okay? Number two, leave politics out of this. We all have opinions about the way things have been handled, the way things are, the way things may or may not be throughout the world. As I like to say, opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one and some stink. Brainstorming is best accomplished, as we all know, by taking your ideas as they spring from your mind without criticizing them. Let your subconscious mind engage them, bring forth the answers to the challenges, and the strangest and most bizarre ideas can be the genesis of functional pathways to inventing and to creativity. So it would be a shame to miss out on that opportunity. Finally, recognize the show will go on. And I'm a firm believer that it will, that we can do the best thing for it. We have a job and we can move really forward in making things happen, but we need to work on it. So that's where my thoughts are. I am truly grateful that everybody's here and sharing your time. Not like a lot of us have a lot of places to go. Some of you are now free. I'm still in Penal Colony, New Jersey. And but for the time being, let's take advantage of the time we have. And so what I'm going to do now is break us out into breakout rooms. What I'd like you to do is one person. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mute everybody right now. What I'd like you to do, if you were the spokesperson for your breakout room, just unmute yourself, everybody else. Let's try and keep everybody muted down here. That way we can listen. If you have any questions, there is a ability to use the chat box and throw your questions in there. And let's see where we can go from here. How did that all go? Was that okay? Did that work well for everybody? Yeah? Good. Okay, here we go. Can I mute you all? And we're going to allow you to unmute yourself. We'll just put this down for the time being. And okay, let's start with breakout room 1. Who's the spokesperson for that?
I don't know our numbers.
Oh.
I was in room number 2, so.
No, that's a problem. Because I did not note who was in which room.
7.
Brenda, room 1. You were our note taker.
Yeah,
Okay, I didn't
said
know
at the
we were.
beginning.
Okay, so we were number 1. All right. That was my first breakout room, so that was really cool. But it was fun to connect. What we decided was some of the biggest challenges was bookings that are canceling or bookings just not coming in right now. And so how we decided the best way to deal with it was just to bump them later down the road, not necessarily give back their deposit, just move the date. And I think people still want these things to happen and they're okay with doing it later. But the big thing was reframing how we are pitching it. So instead of saying, do your grad night in the fall, we can pitch it as, let's do another gathering to help the community connect. Let's celebrate that connection and getting back together and just celebrating being together. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, but we thought that reframe, instead of, this is what you missed out on, let's just celebrate where we are right now. That was the big thing. Another challenge was, how do we deal with bringing volunteers on stage, and how do we have them seated on stage? What are the stages going to look like? And John came up with an idea of staggering the chairs diagonally, making like 3 next to each other and just kind of staggering it that way, so not everybody's all in one lump. But the challenge was, how do we create the phenomenon when somebody relaxes on somebody else's head and it makes that trigger effect? So we weren't quite sure how to still get that with people being separated. Another challenge was, how do we perform with face masks, right? We can't, like, if we're muffled or people can't see our expressions when we're talking, so that's a real challenge. And we came up with, and I didn't know about this, but face shields, I guess plastic little things that you can wear in front of your face. So, or if we need to do our shows like wearing little bubbles, I guess like astronauts, we can do that too. But I guess people are coming up with creative ways to do that. And I thought, well, how are you going to get a microphone in your face mask, or under the shield? But then there's the headset mics that I'm not used to, but that's definitely an option. So those were the big points. And also maybe not necessarily doing the shows, but offering seminars or just kind of mass hypnosis where we do a group induction and have people in the audience pop up and do different things like that, or doing a mass induction and bringing individual people up on stage and putting them in a safe spot. So those were the high points that we hit.
Great, thanks. Kind of move on, and we'll circle back to discussion later on. But thanks for sharing that. Let's, because I do want to move this through. Breakout group number 2. Who had that group?
I did. Okay, so the challenges that we came up with were similar. We also included the travel restrictions, although we didn't really have a solution for that. The proximity of volunteers, we also came to the conclusion that we would have multiple chairs per volunteer. So if they were gonna, flop over, they would have a safe space and they would be around them. And limiting the number of volunteers that we had on stage. So similar to Brenda's concept of bringing up 1 to 2 people. So going throwback to that demonstration era where they only had 1 to 2 volunteers. We talked about also, what do you do when you do need to touch your volunteers? Do you have just a mass of disposable gloves that you're constantly putting on and taking off? Or maybe you could have hand sanitizer at the ready. And of course, attempt to not touch your volunteers as much as possible. So.
Great, thank you. Just want to make a note here.
And can I jump in on the hand sanitizer thing? Because Lisa, that's a good thing and it sparks something. On cruise ships where I typically work, if there's a GI outbreak, like the gastral thing, if that's going around and we get a red flag, then we call it washy-washy, the sanitizer in a spray bottle. So as everybody's sitting on the line of chairs, I'll have an assistant come by and have everybody hold out their hands and we'll washy-washy everybody. So I'll make a point to sanitize everybody's hands before we even start the show.
Great idea.
That's awesome.
Anything else, Lisa?
No, because everybody's going to have similar ones. So a lot of ours were similar to Brenda's group. So I just kind of brought up the things that we had discussed that went beyond.
Great. Third group.
That's me, Tommy V here.
Hey, Tommy.
Hi. First of all, it's great to see all of you here. It's awesome to share. Mark, thank you for putting this together. We basically stuck to a couple topics like deposits and what are we going to say to new clients. So we talked a lot about deposits, and we know that discussing the stage setup and routines is coming, so we didn't get into it too much. Deposits, we're all getting crushed on that. You know, it's always been my policy and everybody in our chat room to give it back. I mean, if they cancel less than 30 days, okay, let's talk about it. But otherwise, many of us have clients for 5, 10, 15, 25 years. So I've been giving them back, and it's up to them. I try to talk them into, you know, applying it to the next date. Some have said yes. Some have said, no, we need it because it's for the seniors. So fine, give it back. And also the problem I had is for over 25 years, I've never had a deposit clause in my contract, believe it or not. So the question came up about what are we going to do about that? What kind of clause should we have in there? Will it address this? And you know, if this happens again, we got a big problem. Another topic we talked about was when things open up again, we should have some answers to when they ask us, what are you going to do to change your show? Is it safe? We need to have that known in advance. It's like selling anything else. What can we say? And then we did talk about setting up the stage briefly and about touching. I've always been a big toucher, but you can do a show completely without it and separate the people. Safety is going to be a big thing. And then somebody mentioned following what theaters are doing now, because their guidelines, and that might be an indication of what's to follow down the road. And that's all I really have from group number 3. It's good to see.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I mean, even with a in New Jersey, we use the term retainer because deposits in the state of New Jersey, for example, are refundable. Retainers are you can hold them. And at the end of the day, this is, you know, constitutes a force majeure. This is something outside that which is normal. And I think just as a business relationship idea is, you know, I'll give it back. You know, and I think that's something that even if you do write your clauses, be aware of where you are and what you know. At the end of the day. Are you going to be chasing a client for and going to court and spending and setting up bad will? So that's kind of the thing. It's a good idea, I think, to have that in your clause, but to move forward. That was number 3. Number 4.
That would be me. Kelly. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Kelly.
Hey, some of the stuff, I won't repeat what the sort of the overlap that we've had. But we talked about, you know, ensuring cleanliness and sanitizing not only people's hands, but the venue, and perhaps needing a clause in there of who is responsible for what. There was one person who was talking about their, you know, something being in that space right before their show. And how do they ensure that that space will be cleaned properly, or how does he not take on that responsibility, and maybe having something contractually in there. Jim Wan had a number of really creative ideas as far as, you know, what to do with all of the empty spaces in between people, and, you know, have them like in a hot and cold routine where you would typically have somebody snuggle up against another person. Put an imaginary person in that space. Use imaginary people next to other people to create the domino effect. That there's always a creative idea to meet any need, and we just have to really give ourselves the time and the space to think of that next creative idea. Using live streaming, not only to live stream to the audience, but to break up your participants so you can have fewer participants within a space, and have it be like a Zoom breakout room and have these groups competing against each other for a grand prize at the end of the show. And at the end of all that, it was basically finding out the needs of your specific group, the needs of your specific venue, and with a willingness to meet those needs. And obviously there's a need to have some of these ideas in place of what we can do when somebody calls up and says, well, how are you going to make sure that your show is safe? We have to be able to answer those questions, but also not going overboard and making sure that we're working within the parameters of the specific needs, because those are going to be different between states. They're going to be different between venues. They're going to be different between groups, as they are right now. And it's up to us to ensure that we can adapt and pivot and be flexible. So I think that's most of what we talked about, in addition to a lot of the overlap stuff that's already been mentioned.
Great, good stuff in there. Group 6, 5, I mean, group 5. Who had that?
That would be me.
Okay. Hey, Don.
How we doing? I appreciate everybody today. I won't go back over some of the things that have already been said, but just some of our ideas that we're dealing with Group 5, where our canceling of shows that people have talked about, small areas, small community colleges, people going to community colleges, with the distancing of chairs, putting less chairs on stage. Reed, one of the people in our group, had talked about Velcroing the chairs together, keeping a chair in between each volunteer on stage, and that way the chairs aren't moving. Challenges for induction. Our induction part of this, our hand lock in the audience to get our volunteers, doing our pre-qualifying before the volunteers actually get up on stage. Another area we talked about was insurance-wise. If someone during one of our shows contracts the virus, hopefully not, what to do with our insurance. Do we put something in our clause or have the name insurance write that out for us, so that's in our clause, that we won't be held liable for, someone getting catching the virus after all this has come out. And then the microphone and the cleanliness, using a coverage for the microphone, have a couple different ones there after each show. If I forgot anything, I apologize. I'm not the best note taker in the world, but those are some of the ideas that we had.
There's some interesting points there, and I think the challenge that all businesses are going to have is with respect to there's an affirmative response. It's not like somebody getting injured on your stage, which is fairly obvious. To be able to show that you were the nexus for that infection is quite a stretch. What's not to say that they didn't pick it up from the school or the McDonald's that they were at beforehand. Those are things that I personally am not going to concern myself about, because I think ultimately it would be the equivalent of somebody catching a cold down the line. Obviously it's not the same, but showing where did that originate from, that's going to have to show that you had something that you did that you didn't take precautions on, and it was foreseeably preventable. And I don't know that anybody's going to be able to draw that as a clue, as opposed to something like sending a COVID-19 positive patient back to a nursing home, which is a clear nexus. So that's my thought with respect to that. Group 6.
Brian, Richard Cole, do you want to do that?
Hey, Barker.
I can do it. We talked about a lot of the same things. One thing that was mentioned was taking our cue from theaters. What are theaters going to do, and should we model kind of the way they're dealing with more of the audience? So we focused in a bit more on managing audiences and how do the audiences sit together as opposed to the volunteers once they're on stage. And we also, started talking about liability. Someone somewhere obviously might see that there might be an opportunity to sue someone should someone, get coronavirus at a public event. We don't know yet because it hasn't happened. But more of what everybody said in terms of precautions with the washy-washy, like what Brenda said, which I think is going to have to happen. And, not having people touching each other and things like that. We discussed that. We obviously discussed how it's been hurting a lot of us, giving back all this money. And I think Tommy V said it, but 100% deposit returns is definitely what we had discussed is the right thing to do, unless we can, of course, move things to next year or a different date. And just really being mindful that I think we are going to come out of this with different shows, and we're going to be more aware of not the audience just as much as how they're organized, and our responsibility to the audience and how they're seated. Because, with the grad nights, they all tend to crowd forward, don't they? They all start standing up, moving forward. They're trying to get a closer look at the stage and all that good stuff. And how do we do, what role do we play with audience management? So that was a lot of what we talked about, audience control and management, of course, as well as volunteers.
Great. Thank you very much. Group 7.
Well, I guess it's me popping up here. How are you doing, guys? You know what? We talked about a lot of the same things, but more than anything else, I think it was more giving some solid pointers on things because we are so busy. We still have contracts that are active. We've only had to refund $500 this year. We do have clauses in our contracts, including cancellation fees, everything else. We've made changes to our policy for COVID. There's a bunch of these questions I can answer. It's just, if you guys want me to, I'm not going to dominate the conversation. But we kind of touch base on all the same things. You've got 7 groups here. I think the same material kept running around again and again and again. So,
Justin, if you had particular points that you think are helpful, let's hear.
Since I do the safe on stage thing, one of the big things, of course, the insurance right now, NAME is freaking out just like everybody else is because most of their members are not re-upping yet because of the cancellation of shows. So they're freaking out, yet at the same time, the insurance policy is actually through Philadelphia. So for those of us who have insurance or work with the insurance, we're going to keep being insured. And Philadelphia is not going away. They're still going to make money in this. At the same time, when you're touching people, and I've got a lot of EMS training, so let's face it, where's your transmission points for this? There's transmission points your mouth, your eyes, your mucous membranes, right? So if you're not getting up into people's faces and licking them and kissing them and coughing all over them, the likelihood of you transmitting anything is minimal. You're touching them on their shoulders. You're shaking their hands. Now, if you have open cuts or wounds, things like that, then you probably have got issues. Could you wear thin, transparent gloves? Yes. Will it creep people out? Of course. Right now, we just saw, they opened up, they released the restrictions in Wisconsin, I think it was, and the moment they did, the bars were packed. So what we're going to see is either a bigger outbreak of this stuff climbing all over everybody, or no major response, and people are going to continue to open up things. Fairs and festivals across America, because I've been on the insides of these conversations, and they don't want me to. They don't want any of us entertainers on any of this. They are not refunding their clients. They are withholding the deposits, and they are rescheduling. So if you don't have a policy that has cancellation fees for cancellation, if you don't have a policy that you make sure deposit's non-refundable, then you're screwed. We have for many years, so we didn't get our taken down by the pants. We've refunded $500 so far this season, and we were packed. We're packed. We're the number one comedy group on the Bash, and the Bash kept us very well fed. We were maybe vacant 3 days a month, and in the middle of all of it, we were on AGT and performed in front of 1,000 people. And all they did was wipe down the mic handles. They didn't change the foam covers or anything else for anybody right when this pandemic happened. So we're standing up in front of Howie and Simon and everybody else, and nobody was really freaking out. Maybe doing some elbow bumps, whatnot. Separating people up on stage, nobody has to have everybody lay across each other. It's just a thing that we do. You can separate everybody like you do in a seminar, and have everybody just lay forward. Give them a solid command to not fall out of their chair, and then work with those who want to play flopper. That's pretty simple. You can still space people out. You can take a stage where you'd normally put 20 people and keep 10. And have adequate spacing and stagger your chairs. That way you have, and do more individual skits and keep your group skits spaced out. Don't have everybody crowding in on each other. Basic things like hot, cold, silly, funny, good smell, bad smell. Sure, you might have to redo it a bit, but they can smell themselves. It's still funny. So some of these things are not that big of an issue. The big issue is what's going to happen next. And here's what I'm finding out from our fairs, because I'm following them. Many of them have canceled out, as most of us have found out, but those that are still operational, even though their larger events have been canceled out, have been told that they can hold events with up to 100 people in attendance come August. So as long as, they don't retract everything right now, that means smaller events, 50, 100 people, which is perfect for any of us. Any of us can do shows of that size. You're going to get groups of 10, and then you're going to get private parties where people are holding things at their houses and whatnot who don't care. I think the biggest worry for everybody right now, as we're all getting older, is whether or not you yourself personally are willing to risk getting COVID-19 to go work your craft. If we're going to go out in public and shake hands and do anything where we're working with groups of people at all, it puts us at risk personally. So that's the real question. Obviously, can you put a clause into your contracts that your client must follow proper cleanliness guidelines and safety rules? Sure. Do you want to stick something in that they need a thermometer, everybody, before they come in the door? You could. Will it go over well? I'm sure their legal team will send it back to you and tell you to go screw yourself. Liability, yeah, you probably should put a clause in for liability on all your contracts saying, hey, we are not responsible if anybody catches any sort of communicable disease or illness. And that's, that is 100% the client's responsibility, and you do need to have a liability, checkbox or waiver signed. Probably should talk to an attorney to make sure it's, as rock solid as possible. Now, I'm not going to whip something off the top of my head here, but yeah, I think that's a real smart idea. Refunds, put a policy in that your deposits are non-refundable and that you will reschedule them for free for the next 12 months. Give them an out, but give them an out that gets them back in. The problem with the proms and the grad nights is a lot of those events were specifically for that grad event. Those kids are gone. That parent group was gone. And so that became a problem. So, for those, if you can talk them into rescheduling into a summer event or an early fall event for those kids, something else. But, for some people, they've gotten really screwed on the prom and grad night season. So because of policy.
Thanks, Justin. And I think you're absolutely right. This is not dissimilar to other situations that we've faced. When HIV was active, it was, I can't tell how many times when I was on a rescue job that we didn't find out that somebody had, Hep C or Hep B, and were active until, and we weren't using gloves at the time. It was gloving up before you touched anybody.
Oh,
back in the day. So
Okay, so you were EMS back in the days, yeah.
I'm an EMS. I've been was riding for 40 years before I retired from that.
Okay.
So yeah, there was that transition, and I don't think any of that changes. And I think some of the suggestions you brought forth, I think, are strong and something worth for all of us to consider. Group 8, and I want to move forward here.
Yeah, that's me, Grant. Hi, everybody. I mean, a lot of the same points that everyone else is bringing up. We talked about chair placement on the stage and utilising more of the stage space in order to kind of spread people out a bit. But one of our main takeaways really was about instilling confidence in bookers and adding value. However, that could be done on bigger shows, maybe offering a second show for the first year after this. And also, we talked about the fear level after this event. Once the major sporting events, and there's going to be a lot of financial pressure for these sporting heads to go ahead. Once they start kind of, resuming some kind of normality, it shoehorns the rest of us in to kind of do something as well. Once people see that we're confident and we're not putting it out there in everybody's face like, oh my God, COVID-19, as long as we're responsible for, hygiene, sanitation, and doing the most that we can and not scaring people, I think very quickly after this happens, it's going to die down. Next year, we'll be doing skits about COVID-19. So yeah,
great.
That's us.
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Wear gloves, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
Okay, group number 9.
Just so you know, it's only 6-foot pole.
Do we have group 9 anywhere?
I don't know who the point person was. A lot of the same things. We talked about it. One of the concepts is who's going to be kind of responsible for the audience. I know as a hypnotist on stage, if we do get stage shows, we would be probably responsible for what happens up on our stage more than anything. And it probably needs to be an addendum to your contract, spelling out, who has the liability, who has the responsibility for the audience. And, you get a high school grad and you've got 200, 300, 400, 500 kids in the audience. There's no way on stage I can be responsible for what's happening out there as well as on the stage. So probably just spelling it out, really having that conversation or document so you're covered your butt. A lot of the other things staggering on stage, I think we kind of came to the realization we probably could pull off a show on stage, keeping everybody spread apart. We've all done the shows where you end up with 3 volunteers that are under, anyway. So, we can do a show with that. The concept came up, or the question of touching. And I don't touch a lot of people, but a lot of times you touch someone on the shoulder, you say the person I'm speaking to right now, when I say, 3, this happens. And we thought maybe we could just overdo it. This is a comedy show. Why not get a big 6-foot long pole and just kind of stand back from people and poke them a little bit in the shoulders and kind of almost mock and have fun with it. Just the person I'm touching right now, and you stand as far back as you can, and the microphone, put a big rubber glove over the microphone and kind of just make some comedy of the situation or light of the situation we're in. Other than that, everything else was pretty much kind of the same thing, just putting procedures in place so that when your clients do eventually have that conversation, you've got a document or a PDF, you can send them right away to show them that you're on top of this, you're prepared, you're ready to go, you've been thinking about it. But ultimately, when the shows happen, it's kind of going to be, not up to us. We have to wait till the legislation allows people to gather and we can put things in place. So I know Richard's on cruise ships. He's not doing shows until those cruise ships go out again, right? So a lot of times it's just hurry up and wait.
Great. I have a question from Ray. Go ahead, Ray.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm on mute. 2 things. One, we're just coming out of the prom grad season, so everybody's concerned about those retainers. I hate the term deposit. It's not a legal term anyway. But everything else we do in the corporate world, the fair world, and all that, you got to remember, those people are used to dealing with contracts, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I guarantee you, they have clauses in there for when the whole bill is due. Usually, on many of them that I have seen with my own eyes, once you sign that the fair signs that contract, they are liable to pay it no matter what from that moment on. So don't be afraid to put something in there about a timing. The other thing, I think it was Kelly brought up about face shields. If you don't want to go out and buy a bunch of them, I thought I'd mention, I made one. I'm in that danger zone of population, so and I still want to go out, and I'm in a nice red state that allows it. I have got this online, and it's a soda bottle, 1 liter soda bottle, and my wife says 2 liter, but I don't think she knows what she's talking about. And this is 3M Dual Class. Everybody else uses. Now, if somebody's really interested in it, they can contact me on Facebook. But it's a couple of dollars to make it, and I've been wearing it all over the place, and makes me feel good, and people smile at me, and doesn't cost much money.
Great, thank you. Okay, we I think that was it. Do we have a 10th room?
We had one more, yeah, we had 10th room.
Thank you, Jim.
Hey, thanks, Mark, for putting this together. So I think the only things that we touched on that hasn't been touched on yet was, and without getting into whether we should or not, but someone mentioned they'd done an online show, and so a whole bunch of stuff. But the one thing I think that people may not have considered, if you do an online hypnosis show, is your stage insurance going to cover that? Because it's a different beast.
Well, that's more of a question for me, isn't it, Jim?
I think it is. Yeah, you might. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know or doc the name or.
I would, well, see, so our insurance is set to cover us when we're at a venue. So if we took an imaginary picture of what this would look like, you've got Bob Smith is sitting in his house at doing, participating in a conference or whatever, while the rest of his family is in the rest of the house. Now, suddenly, Bob Smith starts quacking like a duck, barking like a dog, jumping around the room, while on Zoom, his wife walks in the room, goes, WTF, Bob trips over something. You're in a completely uncontrolled situation. No matter how you frame your pre-talk or your suggestion, it's just a massive amount of liability, zero control. So if you want to do hypnosis from a seminar standpoint with people online and over Zoom, I think that's fantastic because you can have people in controlled situations and have a good set of rules. But to do something where people are going to actively do something or forget something or anything else where you have no real control or, Jim, while you were talking, you cut out about 4 different times. So, you better have one hell of a connection, and so must that person on the other end. Who knows? Maybe I'm even cutting out. I don't know. We're out here on the coast. The internet could be crappy sometimes. That's a lot of danger with that. And I don't see your insurance covering something where you're not actually at a venue. I think they would find that pretty easy to go, yeah, you're not doing shows at venues. But I can talk to Carol Kessler at NAME and see what they can do to offer additional coverage for us. Maybe that'll be a way to get them to continue to get business from hypnotists at this point in time. I've got a couple other questions for her because doing seminars and things over Zoom were not necessarily covered, although I do seminars and trainings and things like that. So there should be some way to do this and get some sort of coverage, but I don't see it being for entertainment.
Justin, the one thing I did want to get, one of the requirements is that there's a signed contract for the,
sure.
That's number one. But number two, it becomes a definition of venue, I think, and that becomes an interesting challenge. With respect to the seminar side, I typically cover that on my clinical hypnosis carrier. because very often that's where my work is going to be done, because I'm working in a clinical setting, and for me that's been the place that I've carried that. But I think there are some good questions that we should be asking Philadelphia about a name as to where we can and where things, as the environment is changing.
If you're doing an internet show, though, wouldn't that be considered multiple venues if you have multiple subjects in different venues or different places? So, that's another thing that I'm sure they're going to look at, because it's not just one venue.
I think the risk level for the insurance carrier, they're going to probably say no, because I help work out all the risk policies on that damn thing.
Right. Has anybody here received a letter from a lawyer due to one of their contracts? I have, and here is his viewpoint as far as deposits go, because of the COVID statute, the way it's written. And this is a show I was doing in Minnesota. Well, is scheduled for June 6th. And I've tried a proposal. I've attempted to reschedule the event and all that. They're adamantly saying that they're not going to have the show for whatever their reasons are. And I'm adamantly telling him that the deposit is non-refundable. He's saying under the COVID Act, any and all deposits are refundable because you have not performed. And that's where we're at with it right now. And again, it's not a matter of whether it's the $500 or not. It's a matter of, I've heard a lot of people on here say, they don't have to refund it. They need to look into how the COVID statute is written to find out, because I don't know. I've had 35 shows cancel.
If they had to refund it, the airlines would have already refunded all of our tickets. The airlines are holding on to billions right now.
And I understand that, but what I'm saying is now, so I'm in that turmoil where I either have to go all the way to Minnesota and argue my case, first of all, or refund the 500. Well, it seems easier that way, but I've got 35 other shows that I've already renegotiated the contracts. We're already well on our way to, either performing or canceling. But this one particular lawyer is very adamant that is not refundable, that he wants the $500 back.
I would refund his money because it's going to save you money long term and less hassle. If you got one that's really screaming at you, just give them their money and get rid of them. They're going to be a pain in your butt anyways.
Yeah. What's 1 hour of legal time going to cost you? What's 2 hours of legal time going to cost you just to answer the letter to tell them to go scratch? And and at the end of the day, where does it get you?
And I understand that, but you also have to understand you were talking to the insurance company. I guarantee you these insurance companies are going to start to write their own stuff that's going to have that they don't want anything to do with the COVID thing, so they're not going to cover anything.
So let me throw this out at you. Have you heard of a force majeure clause?
Yes,
Act
I have
of God
one in
clause?
my contract.
You have one in your contract? What's
Yes,
your
I do.
force majeure clause cover?
It states everything, government, all the way on down to natural to unforeseen.
Right.
I don't have it here in front of me to read to you, but
what's it enforce? Where does it push it to? It pushes it to a reschedule, or if due to an act of God,
no, not at all.
We just shake hands, walk away.
If I cannot perform, the deposit is non-refundable because it's beyond my control, and that covers government strikes, everything on down the line. Now, of course, it doesn't say COVID-19 in there because COVID-19 didn't exist. So,
but you have a force majeure clause that says act of God.
Correct.
So right now, this could be considered as an act of God.
And that's what I told this gentleman. Yeah.
And as an act of God, and you can't perform because you're not allowed to, potentially.
Yeah, because
what's your policy on refund or otherwise?
No, my deposits are non-refundable from the day one when they submit it, and it's like I told him, I am able and willing to perform. It's outside influences that are keeping me from performing.
Right. So in that particular case, you got to be careful how your force majeure clause is worded.
Yeah,
okay,
so
let's
check
that. Let's move on because there's a whole lot more we need to do, and we're running through time. The next is going to be for us to look at the skits that we're currently doing, opportunities for new skits, and what we want to change. You know, this is a great opportunity to really revamp the show you're in. You know, a lot of us perform in the same box, and if you are, this is a chance to break that out, to make that change.
Okay,
So
let's start with
let's go in reverse this time. Let's start with group 10.
Okay, that's me. All right, we talked about, Jimmy mentioned that really our game coming up for however long is going to be about trust, and how people are, we're going to have to develop the trust that people understand that we are taking it as seriously as we need to keep people safe. There was some talk about implied consent and whether or not people were giving their implied consent to be at the show by just being there, especially I think Robin was mentioning it at high school shows, is should we be getting parent consents from the parents? Because if a kid goes home and ends up getting COVID-19 and their parent ends up saying, oh, I didn't know they were going to a hypnosis show, you know, we have to deal with that sometimes anyway. And so that might be something to consider. Another thing was Jimmy thinks that we're not going to have to worry about any of this because we're not having any more shows for a long time. Hopefully that's not true. But a great idea I thought Robin had was maybe we could do some sort of a skit where the kids had to put on gloves for some other reason. I mean, I'm a little concerned about bringing up COVID-19 because I don't know if a relative might have passed away from COVID-19. So I don't think I'd ever bring anything like that up in a show, but maybe we have them put on gloves for some other reason, and then we might have on gloves, which we would touch them with. We'd be able to, you know, Robin said she does a lot of skits where she shakes somebody's hand and they do something, right? And so to be able to continue to do that without having to worry about transmission. And I mentioned, well, you know, if they touch the glove to their face, that's, you know, going to negate that, of course. But she said, we'll give them a suggestion that keeps their hands, you know, keeps them, you've got, you know, we do this all the time, don't you? We got things where maybe their hand is touching their forehead. We make a block so that their hands can't touch their face anymore. And so that could be part of the show. We also mentioned that, and this was in the last one, that there are other directions we can go with the show, like maybe adding in some mentalism effects or things like that that don't have the people as close together, or just use one or two and a way to keep people apart. But of course, that does change the dynamic of the show a little bit. That's all we had.
Great, thank you. You know, again, I'm sure Justin will agree with it. The whole reason for gloves is to prevent you from contaminating yourself and contaminating somebody else in the process. Each time I touch something, I now have to change my gloves. Each time I touch another person, I would have to change my gloves. It becomes,
it's a nightmare.
Yeah, well, beyond a nightmare, you also now have the possibility of having gloves on stage, which is a slip and fall hazard. And, you know, so
and you have a potential hazmat issue, which you need to be prepared to deal with.
You got biohazard.
And again, so from our point of view, I think what the idea was that we all realize that cross-contamination, I'm a biologist, I understand all about cross-contamination, and that's all going to happen. But some of it is the perception of the people who are there that we are doing what we can, and more of the perception of the crowd than it is the actual protection it provides. But yeah, the hazmat stuff is something I hadn't thought of.
Yep.
All right, so let me throw out a couple of things here from an EMS perspective. So you've got random volunteers coming up on stage. You're going to have to get latex and non-latex gloves if you're going to do this. You're going to have people who have allergies to latex or rubber. You're going to have all sorts of different issues. The one thing you did say, Tracy, that is really good is you tell everybody while they're up on stage that at no point in time will they touch their hands or face, wipe their nose, rub their chin, any of those things. So to prevent cross-contamination, at the end of your show, have your assistant or somebody you have designated as a volunteer to do what Kelly Carl said and give everybody the hand sanitizer, you know, end a show. But again, for you more than anything else, the contamination really comes down to someone like yourself getting up on stage, starting to sweat, and after touching somebody, putting your own hand on your face to wipe your own brow. You know, rubbing your own eyes, you know, any of those other things, that's where you're going to get contaminated. And I think the worry should be more about you and us in general not getting this so that we can perform versus hoping that somebody else doesn't have it. Because there's no way you're going to be able to gauge that risk at any one point in time. I think it's more about protecting yourself. And I asked Mark. Mark says he's been in the business for 40 years. And, really, protect yourself. Keep your hands away from your face, things like that. Make sure that there's hand sanitizer before at the start and the end of the show. There's some smart moves right there.
The hand sanitizer is on my table because I don't know what other people have, and I live on the assumption that they've got something that's communicable. It doesn't change the fact that I'm going to participate and get involved. And just like, if I see somebody who goes down and I don't have a pair of gloves, I'm going to do what I'm trained to do. That's just the way I respond. And that's a risk that I know going into my show, going into my life. I don't live my life being afraid. And I don't know that if we live our lives in a situation, I believe that we are confident and not worrying about it, being aware of it and taking proper risk precautions, but not allowing that to control our life, we're not going to be dealing with, look, I can find 1,000 reasons why something's going to fail. The question is, what do I want to focus on? And I know that if I don't do this, it's never going to work. And so I've chosen to move forward on all of that. Thank you there are some good ideas there. I think the idea of using gloves is an interesting one. I'm not sure that it's how it plays out in my own mind. That's why we're all here to share those ideas. How about group number 9?
Okay, we didn't really talk as much about different creation of different skits. We did talk a couple of things about props. How do you use props if you're going to use props? There's one gentleman in our group who's also a close-up magician, and he's actually booked for a strolling gig coming up. I talked about like the foam balls, things what to do. How do you use them? What do you replace them with? So just being cognizant of that. Brenda mentioned the washi and making it funny, making it part of the skit. I would, if you had to use a prop or something, I would hand it to them, or somehow they got it in their hands, and I would be like, nah, you just keep that. We're not passing that back around. Make a little bit light of the situation without mocking it, having fun with it. Everybody at the beginning of your show, okay, everybody put your imaginary face mask on, face shield, rubber gloves, coating, an imagination, just having them interact and, going through things in their mind. It could be part of your first skit, just having them pretend they're putting on all their new COVID gear that they have to wear for the show. I talked earlier about that 6-foot pole, just kind of going overboard and kind of having fun with it, mocking it a little bit without, taking away from the actual dangers of the situation we're in. That's kind of my situation or my kind of comedy. May not be everybody's, but, people are going to remember you making them laugh, and sometimes laughing about a real shitty situation can bring a little bit of tension relief. Remember, at the end of the day, we're out there to just make them laugh, not impress them with our massive skills per se. So they're going to remember the comedy you bring to the show. So that's kind of all we had. We didn't really come up with any other skits. Someone mentioned that we did like the idea of smelling yourself. I think Justin mentioned that, or someone where you're not the person beside you stinks, you stink, and you can smell it all over you. And just making all the skits inwardly personal with you and not necessarily with anybody else. It'll be an adaptation, that's for sure.
Great.
Well, you can also make it so that they smell people from across the stage too.
Yeah,
it's just the smell coming
you're
from.
not gonna bury your nose in their armpits, but you can bury your nose in your own armpit or whatever. And that's again, it's funny, it's comical, and it's kind of the sign of the times. We could be very well into this new normal for a year, 2 years. Who knows how long this is going to go before we go back to what it was before.
Okay. Group 8.
Yeah, we kind of got sidetracked a little bit away from the question. I mean, obviously the hand sanitizer and sanitation stuff we talked about, and not being too touchy and physical with them. But in the short term, we were talking about how some of the schools are requesting online virtual shows, and how best to use that as a suggestion, doing it as a presentation rather than as an entertainment skit, and trying to control that as much as we can, rather than having people doing physical hypnotic phenomena, doing it more as a educational presentation in an entertaining way until we can go back to normal. And that kind of took up most of our time, to be fair.
Great. One of the things that I have not heard discussed, and I think in some respects it could be the white rabbit or the pink elephant in the room here for us, is that there are a lot of stage hypnotists who use a physical induction, whether it's a drop induction or some other sort of physical induction, and that I think is going to be a challenge for those people who use that as their primary means of doing induction. And I'm just finding it interesting that I haven't heard any of that yet discussed as to something that people are talking about or dealing with, and perhaps the people that are here in this meeting don't use that type of induction in their work. Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, not at all. Not one bit. I get pretty much everybody up here does at some level.
Well, but exactly my point. My point is that
really, when you think about it, unless you're dropping people so that they're so that you're dropping them on the ground, you can dodge that. You can put them in a chair. You can shake their hand and keep a hand on the shoulder, whatnot. Drop them down. The right instructions. You can still do rapids very quickly without too much personal contact. As long as you're not dropping them so that their face is up on your shoulder and their lips are up against your face, I think you should be fine with some basic modifications. It's not going to be rocket science. The fact of the matter is rapids and smaller shows might be the wave of the near future. While we are recovering from this, because people are going to want smaller groups. So I don't know if I would necessarily shy away from it, but I'd be really careful on anything where you're stacking people up on top of each other right now.
Well, I think there's all the way around, there's an issue with that. So that, whether that's, I'm not a fan of stacking, but that's a personal thing, and I'm not going to get into my personal thing.
No, that's fine. Neither am I.
Mark,
go ahead.
Can I make one comment on that?
Absolutely, Jim.
A lot of times at the beginning of the show, you'll do an instant rapid on someone and for the phenomenon for people to see it. Well, if you have one or two good subjects on stage, and rather than pull a hand pull, say, now watch me, when I clap my hands together, you're going to go right down in hypnosis. What you're doing is you're demonstrating on that person which works, but now you're also training other people on what's going to happen when you do with them. So as long, it's kind of like a teaching situation in every case. So if you teach them the right way, they're going to follow. If you can present yourself in the right way. So that's the option you can do.
Jim, you can do it like that. You can snap your fingers. You can have them hold their breath. You can pull a card out of your wallet. It doesn't really matter. Any of those things will work just as long as you set the suggestion right.
Right.
Wanted to have it out there for people who may not have asked the question, who may be thinking about the question, so that there's part of that as well. So anything else from Group 8? Grant, you guys good?
That's perfect. That sounds good.
Excellent. How about Group 7?
Well, that's us again. The big thing is as this comes through its heyday, don't make fun of COVID-19, not to pick on Christy here a bit, but 6-foot poles up on stage, you will inflame a lot of your coastal people. Anybody who's up there online right now, screaming about masks, calling everybody else COVID idiots, ranting, all over this, is going to be very sensitive to the possibility we're making fun of this at all. I think anything that completely collapses, the world economy for multiple months is something that we probably should shy away from for a very long time. And by the time it becomes relevant, it'll be non-existent. So I'd be very careful making any sort of joke about this pandemic, because it's literally killing people's livelihoods, their jobs, their families, their mortgages. So I'd be very, very cautious about anything like that outside of, taking basic precautions and not making it a big thing. Make it smaller than necessary if possible, at least for you people on stage, make them feel comfortable. Outside of that, modifying your skits, as Jim said, we can do 1,000 different things to make a rapid work and look amazing. You've got hot, cold, silly, funny. Make them sniff themselves. Make them hot or cold by themselves. Don't set them up so that they're hugging and crawling all over everybody. I'm not a big fan of that anyways, because with groping issues and things like that, you got to be careful with guys and girls. Stagger your stage bit so that your people aren't next to each other. Make sure in your pre-talk, you set people up so that when you're doing their skits, they know how to fall over, preferably to the front, comfortable, in a relaxed position, just do all of those basic things. And I think you'll be fine on any of your skits. Your group skits, spread them out. Don't use the entire stage. I'm used to having 20, 30, 40 people up on stage. So instead of that, I'll bring up 10 or 15 and spread them out, stagger them on bigger stage. Smaller stages, I'll use a smaller group. Some of it's just common sense. Other parts are, depends on how long this is going to go before everybody quits freaking out. Yeah. But I don't think any of your skits are really dead in the water unless you're doing something that clusters people together. So uncluster them. Don't worry about having them fall over on each other. I know it looks cool. I like it. I've got tons of videos doing just that. But, as far as this is concerned, you were going to be more of a street approach, I think, and one-on-ones.
You can always throw in your murder hornets and bring them into the game.
Hey, Mark, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Hey, Michael.
I got to ask a question about this. Justin, you said something that I really, really liked on this. You said, don't make it bigger than what it is, make it smaller than what it is. I think that is extremely appropriate. Now, I do have a question, though. I know that there's some therapeutic hypnotists. I'm one of them. I don't do this, but I am a therapeutic hypnotist. But that they've sent out videos and audios and how you can, stop you from touching your own face. Okay. My question as it relates to stage is, one of my clients said, can you give our students suggestions to not touch their face? Now, at the end of our shows, a lot of us give motivational messages in there, and I think that's appropriate. Should we throw in there and, you won't touch your face, to stop the spread of this horrible thing? I don't even know what you need to complete that sentence. What are your thoughts on that, everybody?
Don't touch your face until after you've washed your hands. Wash your hands, wash and sanitize your hands before you touch your face.
That's critical. Yeah.
There you go. Just wash it, because people are going to touch their face. They need to touch their face. They're going to move their glasses, play with their contacts. They got to scratch and itch. There's some basic hygiene things. And number one is just wash your hands before you touch your face. It becomes an automatic, intrinsic thing that you do each and every day, each and every way, blah, 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 however you want to word it. Easy enough.
You always tell them what you want them to do. If you say don't, and I was growing up, don't do this, don't do that. First thing I wanted to do was do exactly what they told me not to do. So direct it always toward what you want them to do, and try to replace the negative with the positive and move forward. I think Mike's got a good idea, and you do just move forward what you want them to do.
Yep, I like that. Wash your hands instead of don't touch your face. And obviously, that was a question from one of my schools. I haven't given a whole lot of thought at this point, but I like that too. Please, everybody, remember, wash your hands, stay safe, all those positive things. Absolutely, framing it the correct way. Thank you, everybody.
Great, thanks, Michael. Group 6.
Yeah, everything that we talked about's already been covered.
Okay, great. 5. Remember to unmute yourself before you speak from group 5.
If I can unmute myself, technology. So we a lot of the stuff has already been covered, but a couple of things that we talked about. First off is we talked about maybe having a in the skits, the chairs as to springboard off of what Justin said, having a chair in between everyone. And at first it was like, well, how's that going to affect our skits? But actually, in our group, we discussed that you get a lot more movement. You know, if you're doing like a horse race, or you're doing they're driving a car or something like that, there's more movement, more room for them to move. So, you know, maybe it's a good idea, and think of it like that. Also, framing the group skits, making them more individual, and breaking them up like Justin talked about. And then we had mentioned come up with the idea of maybe having an induction, and this is to talk about what Michael just asked about. Doing a lot of us do motivational things at the end, but doing it where you're doing it kind of a general suggestion that, and even saying that the people in the audience, even though they're not on stage, if they want to participate, they can just kind of, you know, close their eyes, drop into the moment, and then give them general suggestions for boosting their immune system, or just, you know, feeling healthy and things like that. Doesn't have to be therapeutic in nature, although I'm not really scared to do that. But the point is that it could be general like that, and then Reed in our group had talked about, which I think is brilliant, is using tape to kind of mark out spots on the stage and saying, this is where you're going to stand. So, you know, that way, you know, you're giving direct suggestions of where they're going to stand when they stand up. You know, you can move them and say, stand on that spot there, take your mark. You know, and we talked about how these different skits you can take an individual or a group skit and make it an individual, each individual seeing it, and then also to springboard off of what Justin said about making them smell themselves. You know, if you're doing the good smell, that could be very comical if they're, you know. And I mentioned that I'm doing a lot of I'm a mentalist too, so I do I've been incorporating some of that into the stage hypnosis show, but not really. But one of the things I've been doing in the mentalism show is figuring out how to take an individual effect and put it, you know, make it a group effect. And so I think we're doing it the opposite here, and I think that's a good idea, is to figure out how to take a group effect, but bring the reactions and the actions of the person down to an individual. So that's what we covered. Oh, and one thing I just thought about, we were talking about the washi and the hand sanitizer, and it just dawned on me that massage therapists have slings that they carry, or waistbands that they carry a pump bottle of lotion in that sling, in that holster, so you could have a pump bottle of hand sanitizer on you, and as you're just moving from one person to the next, you're just squirting it in your hand, rubbing your hand, and, you know, it's just an idea.
Okay, group 4.
That would be me. Lots of overlap again. We basically talked about how this is an opportunity to all become better hypnotists, and that it is going to require us to just get out of our comfort zone and start to see where things need to be changed, and to give ourselves permission to try new skits, new ideas, where some of us may have become really comfortable and haven't changed a whole lot. This is an opportunity for growth. Jim mentioned, you know, the different ways that participants and volunteers respond. Of course, we know visually, auditory, and kinesthetically. The kinesthetic is somewhat tampered now. We can't use that to full effect, but maybe there's a way to up the visualization part of it, meaning if you've typically been someone who has left their participants through most of the show with their eyes closed, this is an opportunity for you to try out having those participants more often with their eyes open and being able to feed off of each other's energy. And I believe from a participant standpoint, it's way more fun to do a show with eyes open than eyes closed. So that's another challenge, to maybe move out of your comfort zone if you're not used to doing that. And then just piggybacking on what was said earlier, you know, the immune boosting thing is, I think, a tremendous opportunity for us to do some really powerful teaching in a very light way, to kind of counter counteract some of this mass hypnosis that's been going on in the other direction without becoming preachy about it or anything like that, but really just introducing the whole idea of using your imagination and visualizing health and things. So everything else was overlap.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Group 3.
Group 3 here. Again, a lot of overlap. And this is really good stuff. Thank you again, Mark, for doing this. Maybe we should get together again soon. Some people in our group said there's really not a lot to change as far as routines. And I've heard that from the other groups too, that we can still do most of the things we did. I think Justin mentioned that, and do it a little bit differently. Whether that be group or individual routines, we will have to make some modifications. We will not have any touching. And this came up also, we would not joke around about COVID. As far as the gloves and the hand sanitizer, great ideas, but my question is, where the hell do you get that stuff? Hand sanitizer is non-existent in the Northeast here. And then after the show, who's gonna clean out all those gloves? You have to have a hazmat team come in. I'm joking, of course. This is all good stuff. We will survive. That's all I have to say. I will be leaving this group soon because I need to go. Thank you very much. And peace to all.
Thanks, Tommy. We only have a few more minutes anyway, so group number 2. Somebody here? We lose group 2?
No, I'm here.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Lisa.
Technical difficulties finding the buttons. All right. So one of the things that we talked about that can change some of the skits, it isn't a skit that I do, but the dancing with the hypnotists or dancing with a broom or whatever. We talked about going old school, like middle school, old school, where you couldn't be close to each other. You know, somebody was saying 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart, but they can have a dance. They can dance that way, or you could do a dance. We're specifically talking about the group skit where everybody dances. You could have them dance one at a time, or you could have them on opposite ends of the stage and have a dance off. One of the other things that came up was post-hypnotics or audience participation skits where you send someone out into the audience to, you know, get their favorite celebrity and take a picture with them or whatever. So we talked about doing selfies from the stage or being ninja-like in your paparazzi skills so that they weren't seeing you, they weren't touching you. And for reinductions, we had one thing that was a little different than what other people said. It was similar and it was clapping, but it was having the audience participate in that. So having their clapping serve as the trigger for getting them to go back to sleep. And that's about it.
Thank you. Number 1, last group.
All right. Well, I think the only thing different that we had was suggesting that when we're doing the group routines, that they're together but separate. Much like Lisa said, you know, keeping your distance, keeping your space, but suggest that they're together but separate. And in the past, I've used an assistant to help me space people out on stage to put them where we want them to be. But I really like the suggestion too of the markers on stage. But if we can't get in there and set that up ahead of time, having somebody that can help keep them spread out would be is helpful. And also it's nice to have a second set of eyes watching them. And John he gave a good suggestion to like the poll thing that somebody else suggested, in that reframing, instead of saying, I'm going to touch you with a 10-foot pole, because that can be taken way bad. Right. But he has used a magic wand, a hypnotic magic wand in the past that has a little like comfy thing on the end, like a little ball, I think you said, John. Yeah. And that's fun. That's a fun way to touch somebody without touching them. But to that point, part of the whole touching them process is, in my experience, I do that as a deepening and a test to let me know that they're actually relaxing. So I don't know how touching them with a magic wand is going to be able to give you that same feedback. But I love the idea, instead of a 10-foot 10-foot pole. It's a magic wand and it's shorter. We don't necessarily have to be 6 feet apart unless that's a regulation. And then the other thing was using more individual suggestions that start to play off of each other throughout the different routines. And Boris suggested that, and that he weaves in those suggestions throughout the show for the individual callbacks and just milks them until they become funny, until it's a whole big group thing. So you have all of these people playing out their individual suggestions at the same time.
Great. And that's something in my own shows, I use that cascading domino effect where one individual skit triggers the next individual skit, which triggers the next one. I think the whole part about touching, and I think what's being lost here is that the touching is not necessarily for fear of contaminating them, but if I'm touching them with if I'm touching you with the wand and I'm touching you with the wand, now I've got the same transference. So it's the same difference. The only difference is that I'm not physically touching that directly, and so I don't see where that is much beneficial. I think there's an important takeaway here for us in this discussion, and I think that important takeaway is that in the height of all of this craziness, all of this turmoil, the reality is that our shows are not going to have to change very much. We are going to make some differences, but it's not that devastating change that I've got to completely do everything differently. What this is about being mindful of the circumstances that we're in at this time, and making relatively small adjustments to that, to test ourselves, to take ourselves to a new place. And I think in that process, we're giving ourselves an opportunity to really grow. And I think that is a benefit that we may not have had in another circumstance. This is forcing us to be there. This is forcing us to look at things differently. It's forcing us to take a look at what we're doing and why we're doing it. What's the purpose of doing what we do in our routines, in our stage work? And I think that that's really important. I think the other thing is I'm really excited at the fact that we had 50 some odd people here throughout the event. It varied up and down, but we had an opportunity to share. And I think a lot of us have never really had the opportunity to sit down as a group of stage hypnotists and listen and share and become cooperative in what we do and how we move our industry forward. And I think there's some real benefit to taking a look at what we can do going forward to do that. I think there is benefit for all of us. And I think it just strengthens all of us as an industry, and it helps us to be better at our craft and to be better at entertaining the public that we serve. And so I want to thank you. That's the bottom line. I want to thank all of you for doing what you've done, for coming out, for giving 2 hours of your life and sharing your experience as professionals, because you've done an amazing amount of work, and it's okay to be stressed. This is normal for us, but we don't have to let it paralyze us. We can see how we can grow. And so if there's an opportunity, if you want to do this again sometime, just let me know. Just send me a message, text me, let me know what your thoughts are. Don't be a stranger. We say hi online. We put a face to the name and the voice now. And I thank you all. And
bravo.
It's been a fun thing.
Hey,
thank you.
I'd like to say something, Mark.
Sure,
Mark,
go ahead.
I think we covered a lot of good points today, and I thank everybody for that. But I still think that with uniformity, and Justin, James, you can help with the insurance updates as to what those questions were about. but also mainly when it comes to our contracts. If somebody can post up into the forums, or we can have a certain spot that we go to look at the clauses and and what we can do with our contracts to have those updated. Justin, you seem to be very briefed on that kind of thing and putting our.
I am,
lots of
and
God
here's one of the.
clause.
Right, and here's what I've been told. You need to make sure that whatever you do, if we put up something generic and it bombs, then we're opening up ourselves to liability. So you can write some basic content and put a big old disclaimer that, unless you verify this with your attorney, that, use at your own risk. But otherwise, anybody who posts anything up is opening themselves up to liability. So you got to be careful with it. So,
Well, I think
this is one of those things we really do need to get an entertainment attorney to say, we need to write a bulletproof force majeure clause that covers our butts.
Absolutely.
Versus, legal Zoom.
Right, because I think we're all using something at this point, but obviously there's holes in it. And I think we need something a little more solid and have that uniformity within all of us. And that way we don't have these questions comes, God forbid something come again like this. But just in general, even with like Tommy V was mentioning, he never had anything, which
right.
is very surprising to me.
I've seen it with a lot of hypnotists over the years. That's nothing new.
Yeah. So that's where I stand on that. If there's more help with that and more suggestions on that,
give me a holler later.
I will.
Just before everyone jumps off, two people that weren't on the on this today, Rich Guzzi is going to have a virtual show tonight online, and he's a comedy club hypnotist. And then Chris Jones is going to have one on Saturday night. So if you want to see a virtual show done by someone who's been around for a while in both the comedy club and also at the college and high school level, you might want to check those two out. I'm just going to check it out for learning. But if you want to see a virtual program online, you might want to check it out.
You going to post the links, Jim?
I can do that.
That'd be great.
Excellent. Just reach out, and don't be afraid to reach out to somebody else that you see here. We don't have to do this alone. We can continue to share. So thank you all very much. Have a great one, and wishing everybody success. And we will get through this. The show will go on. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark.